right, today we're going to come alongside what Simon and have already shared, individuals have already shared on developing digital strategies to reach youth. So this is where Thirst comes in, because this is the kind of work that we've been doing for 4 years now, right? So I was part of the pioneering team. I'm creative. Yeah, thanks, Simon. So I am the creative producer there. And that actually, to me, sometimes still kind of like goes up in a question mark, because creative producer actually just means like almost all of us are doing creating in Thirst. All of us are doing creating. You guys are doing creating. What does creative producer even mean? So what, for me, like a bit of background on my own education and stuff like that, where I came from. I come from a branding design background. So I spent 4 years in an agency. I was a copywriter. So my medium is writing, right? And then after that, I spent the next 4 years at Thirst working on content, getting stories out, getting like great content out that would disciple a generation. But also at the same time, getting our brand out, because when we started, nobody had any idea what Thirst was. They were like, what's Thirst? And so that came with a lot of networking, attending actual physical conferences, going for prayer meetings with church groups, and just, getting to know people. Because in the end, it was not about Thirst just talking to into the void of like the online world. It was also getting all the Christian voices into that space. And I remember in the early days, we used to struggle. We'd be like, oh my goodness, how many stories can, like, just a few of us, and that's probably like 5 of us were writing, like, how many stories can we write? If we were pushing out stories every day, after a while, it's like the well runs dry, right? Like, I've given my entire life. I told you my story since I was born all the way to like now, and so the idea for us really was that the continuity of it was to get all the voices in. I remember God was so clear. He was like, actually, every single Christian in Singapore, right? And that is a lot of people. I'm not great at numbers, but I know that's a ton of people. It's like 18% of our population, right? Christians, if you were just go to, and somehow it's like a fishing game, right? If you were just fish anywhere. So I will just continue where I left off, right? So the idea was really just bringing many, many voices in the Christian world together, and we're amplifying those voices. We're not just producing it on our own, right? So that's really a partnership. And I hope that as you guys go on, don't ever feel alone. Don't feel that you're the only person doing this and you're going to have to think of every idea in the world, right? Because it's tiring. But the good news is there's many Christians out there. Every single Christian has at least one story. It's called your life story, right? Your testimony. And actually there's tons more stories of like other things we're learning in our lives. So like just partner. It's all about partnership and collaboration, and that's what Thirst has always done, right? And so for myself personally in my work, I do anything that's not related to something artistic or administrative, because those things are not really my strengths. I am definitely not artistic, and I'm pretty bad at admin, like doing all the scheduling and stuff like that, which my team members who are here today are fantastic at, and you also need that kind of help. So everybody brings a different kind of skill to the table, which is why I'll talk a bit about like assembling that table, of creatives and of people who are great at admin, people who are great at scheduling and putting stuff out and making sure you have some sort of media plan, and sticking to it, because like I'm not that kind of person. You need teammates, right? You need a team. You're not alone in this. The church is a team in itself. Jesus never left us here to do it all on our own. In fact, he left his spirit with us so that we will always have help. So remember that your best teammate in this is the Holy Spirit. He knows tech better than we do. He gave us this gift. He knows how to redeem it in a way that is that will speak of the gospel, that will bring, it's exactly part of his plan to bring it to the ends of the earth. And today you literally can have, right now, we are speaking to people in different nations. That's how powerful it is. I don't think like the disciples, definitely the disciples, Paul had no idea this was gonna like hit the world. They were doing it all by foot. They were doing it all word of mouth and, going there themselves. But here we have something so powerful. How can we harness it? How can we use the wisdom of God to use this in a way that would really bring the message of what he's speaking to the church, what he's speaking to the individual life is looking at the screen, like very specific prophetic messages that are coming through the things that you do as well. So do not ever despise the small things that you do, thinking that it's just one story, thinking that it's just like, no one's going to read this, someone might read it. That's the most important thing, is that even if one person reads it, and that person is impacted for Christ and decides to, give their lives to God, isn't that enough? So the numbers in themselves, like, are one thing. It shows that, yes, you're doing good work. But another thing is to also remember constantly, as Indigenous has also mentioned that behind every number and every statistic that we're seeing on Google, like, analytics and stuff like that, is still a person. And we don't know how they're interacting with whatever we put out. We don't know whether they're crying because they read a story we put out. We don't know whether they're suddenly like praying in their rooms on their knees on the floor, just like giving their lives to Jesus because someone showed them how. Like, don't ever despise that. You don't know what's going on. And sometimes maybe we'll only get to heaven and find it out. God will tell us then. We have no idea. Okay, so just moving on really quickly because I spent a bit of time on that, is to give you an actual report from Thirst, right? So it's early. I'm not a morning person, so I hope I am coherent. But this is literally the first thing I'm going to talk about is about getting woke, right? So I need to get woke. I need to get woke right now. But this is also a topic on why we need to start on why we're even here today. Like, why are you guys gathered? Like, almost 200 of you guys are gathered today and learning something that I hope will, will follow you. If you're going to the polls later, we'll follow you there. We'll follow you if you go for lunch later. Not something that I just say that everyone has already heard, right? I hope this is a message that you yourself are able to take to your church, to take to your group, to take to the next person that you speak to and go like, oh my goodness, I just got woke, right, in this session. I will try my best. I have a very loud voice, so I hope that kind of works. Okay, so why does the church need to get woke on social media? I really don't want to repeat something that's been said over and over again, but I myself have come from media, right? So I used to create media as a copywriter. We're writing brands, we're writing for brands, we're writing for advertisements, right? We're writing things that communicate to a mass audience. And the truth is that social media, so social and media, right, is something that has added thousands of voices to mainstream media. So it used to be just the news. It used to be just newspapers, like whoever's running the blogs and whoever's running the sites have most control over what people are reading. But now, because we have social media, everyone has a platform. Everyone has a little soapbox, which is what the speakers stand on to speak, right, in a public space. So it's almost like it's given us a little box and you can stand out there and shout whatever you want, and someone's gonna hear it. We're not shouting into the void, as you realize. You saw the numbers just now. 80% of Singapore is digitalized, which means it's on social media and is connecting with people all the time. That's a lot of people. Okay, so the kind of things I want to wake you guys up to is the fact that in this process, because of this is happening, there's many extreme voices as well that you can, as I said, you can say anything you want. If you want to have extreme ideas, you can say it and someone's going to hear it. You can actually have a chance at influencing people towards whatever idea you have, right? So if you have crazy ideology as well, or the way of thinking, if someone just stands up and starts echoing you, and then you have more people echoing you, likes and shares are echoes, right? Commenting is also like that. Yes. So that is something we need to think about. Okay, because we are youth. I think a lot of you are youth leaders here today, right? This is what people are taking in, right? And if we are not filtering ourselves, because most people enter social media not filtered, as in filtered within your mind, right? Thinking that oh, I can't believe everything that I see. Oh, I better think twice about what I'm consuming. Think of it as a diet, right? Eating. You need to consciously eat. Otherwise, you're going to overeat, right? I mean, I've watched some nutritionist videos and they say stuff like that, and I think that applies to a media diet as well, right? And you can bring this analogy to your young people and say that, hey, it's really not that difficult to try and be conscious of what you're consuming. Just think of it as eating, right? Okay, so as I mentioned, it's largely unchecked. There's no actual censorship, more or less, on the net. Even the government would say this, that they can't really catch everything that people are saying, and that's why it's a pretty volatile and a bit of a dangerous space if you're going there completely thinking that it's going to be rainbows and butterflies and everything people say is true and wonderful for your soul, right? So that's something for the youth leaders to think about. Okay, another thing is that we are the sum of every bit of media we consume, right? Every story, everything you've watched, every video you've watched, every kind of idea you're letting in, if you're just reading it, right, it sticks, it somehow adds on to you because it's kind of building your worldview, right? It's it's like a Frankenstein of every single bit of like opinion like coming in. And think about it, millions of voices now coming in, right? That means there's this crazy Frankenstein of worldview in your mind, and a worldview of young people's minds, especially if they're using media at a whole much, you know, in a for a long time, and they're using it like all the time, and more than you're listening to your sermons, more than you're reading the Bible, more than those kinds of things in. So the first thing I wanted to say is that, as I said, was that we need to consume, right, godly content. But the truth is that we're probably consuming more secular content than we are godly content, right? Not everyone reads. People are not, unlike camping out on the Thirst site reading only Thirst. People aren't camping out on like YouVersion and reading only the Bible. People aren't always on Bible Gateway reading the Bible. You know, that's not happening. And we need to just get woke and go like, you know, instead of just policing them on this, to just like at least acknowledge that this is what's going on, because then we can think of strategies after that, right? Rather than like, oh, let's just stop it, let's just like, you know, censor everything, let's just like give them some kind of like digital curfew and make sure that nobody in our circle is using it beyond 10 o'clock. It doesn't work, you know, that's not going to work, right? We need to have way more sustainable ideas that are actually useful for the person as well, right? So as I mentioned, a diet, don't overeat, right? Because if you overeat junk, right, you have no space for real food. Like your parents will tell you this all the time. If you eat junk food like just before your actual meal, you're gonna have no space for it. So why do you think young people, myself, you know, all of us here, sometimes really kind of struggle to read the word? Because the word is real food. Like those are real solid things that you should be building your life on, should be building your spiritual nutrition on. But most of our internal nutrition is already being filled by a whole bunch of junk because we're blindly watching videos of cats, which is me too, you know. So I'm not saying this is like just them. It's like a me, you thing. It's like a all of us thing. Okay, and so the final point of getting woke is that, as I mentioned, you have no control over what they are reading. You have so no control over how long they're using media. You've also no control over what exactly are they seeing. And like, just look at yourself. Think of the questions, think of the stuff that you have also been reading. And I am at fault for that as well. Like I think about it, I'm like, yeah, you know, I basically just read most of the stuff that my friends post and like whatever's interesting, and whatever could like catch your eye. And the thing is, because no one knows, no one will know that you're clicking into this to look, check this part, like this part of the world out. No one's gonna like know if you went to like spend more time like finding out about this, and like, and your youth leader doesn't know, you know, my cell leader won't know, my parents won't know, you're not gonna tell them anyway, you know, who will know? But I think the thing is that God knows, but we always think that God's not actually watching whatever content we're watching right next to us. You know, He's seeing it, and I think that's you know, that's something to think about as well as we pasture people. Yeah. So as I said, you know, it's best to get woke to it instead of like shoving it back down. Right? We cannot hide them from media influence, right? And we cannot police their usage. But the truth is that if we don't disciple them, therefore to use it well, if we don't disciple them as people, right, then the mainstream media will. Because they're spending way more time out there in the mainstream media on their phones looking at stuff that you have no control over than they are in our spaces of discipleship, right? So how can our discipleship be something that goes way beyond that 1-2 hours that you're sitting with them? Right. So I hope that you're taking notes, you're writing down questions, you know, like really getting you thinking, because it's kind of still early in my books, but like I think it's a great time to get woke even about this topic in a way that you've never gotten woke before. Because like, I'm not saying things that are new. I'm not saying anything that people haven't been repeating ever since social media, you know, came into the light. Right. People have been saying this for the longest time, but I want you yourself to start thinking of your own strategies, of your own, like, you know, little like notes that you're taking for your own specific group that you lead. Okay, so as Russ and Simon also mentioned, I think it was Russ who mentioned certain like thought patterns that the world is going down, which is secularism. You know, I wanted to just kind of delve a bit more. So we have not actually planned our slides together. It's really amazing. I think the Spirit is saying something. So if I'm repeating, the Spirit's just repeating it so you don't miss it. Okay, take down notes. Here we have, just really quickly, I am no social expert, you know, I'm not a sociology expert. So this is something that even I have just noticed after using social media for a good more than a decade by now. So more than a decade by now. And so the first one being, everything is a social construct. You might know what this means in the sense of when people just say, oh, like for example, religion is a social construct. Humans just made it up. You know, it could be also marriage is a social construct. Humans just made it up. So actually, it's just a piece of paper. I don't know what you guys are just making this giant fuss about protecting it, protecting the institution of it. You know, the sacred. What sacredness? It's just a piece of paper, guys. So you will hear like, you know, arguments like that, and you actually, as I mentioned, you don't realize, you might hear it coming out right from outside you, like, but at the same time, you know, think about what young people are then kind of like learning on the inside, and therefore filtering for themselves as they read, you know, certain things going on in the world. For example, like a high profile couple divorces, right? And then you be like, your first instinct is that, oh no, you know, like divorce sucks. But then someone is gonna say on the net, like, you know, someone, you would definitely in the comments, that like, oh, it's a contract anyway, why are you guys making such some giant deal about this? Or for example, we're protecting the institution of marriage with a certain law, right? And then you will hear people saying, but it's a construct. I don't know why you guys are like even like protecting some kind of like, you know, it's a state of mind essentially. You guys made this up. There's no actual thing. You guys made it a thing. Right? So that's social constructs. You get more about it by just Googling it. Move really quickly into what context is. So another argument that secularism kind of has is that truth changes by context. Right. So Russ already talked about this, and I'll say it again. Right. What I mean by context is that you're like, oh, but in their context, because they're not brought up the same way, right? They don't have the same worldview or religion, or like they just came from a different culture altogether. Therefore, this by context, whatever my truth is, does not apply to them. Therefore, I, you know, cannot possibly speak out on that because that's not fair to them, right? And so there's a lot of silencing going on because of these two things I've mentioned, constructs, right? And context, where you'll be like, oh, maybe my mind just made it up. Or like, oh, maybe it doesn't apply to these people. It only applies to me. Or or on the flip side, you'll be like, oh, you know, whatever truth they're saying, actually, well, in my context, because I went through this stuff, technically I'm not held to that kind of, you know, that kind of principle at all, whichever my pastor is saying as well. You could easily, you see, it comes out both ways. It comes out, it manifests as well, where it's just so insidious. You don't realize exactly how we're interacting. So the last one, I just added this in last night actually, something that has been going on louder and louder in our space, and I had to mention it. You know, it's that opposing ideas need to be, and the people who hold those ideas should be cancelled. Right. So the cancel culture is something that's kind of like really like, you know, rearing its head. I don't think I don't think it's like massive, like wow, you know, everyone's talking about it, but most people are talking about it already. As in, people are starting, you know, we are seeing this word pop up a lot. Because I think a lot of like different high profile people are stepping out to say certain things, getting cancelled, and then so now the whole world just watching this happen. And you're like, oh my goodness, there's this cancel culture thing, which it was basically just like, oh, shut this person down. You know, if they have an idea that goes against like some other idea, then they should just be boycotted. We should just completely like make sure they never speak at stuff again. Make sure that like, you know, we burn their books, or make sure that like, you know, we get them shut down by the government. I don't know, you know, like people have been doing things like that. And like, and it might sound like a new thing, but as I've written about previously, it's not a new thing. Think about what cyberbullying is. Isn't that exactly what cyberbullying is on an individual personal front, with just like maybe a smaller group of people just ganging up against this one person in a smaller group, right? Saying, oh, you know, like this person ugly, you know, like, oh, this person is I don't know what. And then like, you know, you should just die, you should just go and kill yourself. If you read the news, you would see very sadly certain stars who have taken their lives because of cyberbullying and being called out by netizens that they should just go and kill themselves because like you're so ugly or you are just so weird, right? And it's so sad to think that a voice like that from a stranger online is enough, can be amplified enough to affect one person that way, right? And so I think that this cancel culture is a second ideology that has been it's like really the new thing that's circulating. But on a good note of that, think about it. If one person's voice like kind of echoed by a bunch of people can affect one person so much, what happens when that's redeemed? What happens when that is a good voice, when that is a voice that is telling someone that you are of worth, you are worthy of love, you are worthy of a life much greater than you think, and you are so incredibly special and loved, by someone far greater than you could ever imagine. What happens if we, as the Christian, as the church, band together to have that voice? Because one person looking at that on a screen, if they can be affected by negative stuff, I'm pretty sure that it can be affected by positive stuff as well. So how can we then be that alternate voice that comes in space, which is what Thirst is doing. And I hope that, this is not just Thirst work. This is something that I hope that all of you would start doing in your own space as well. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so I will really briefly go through this because later in the workshops, Gracia and Gabriel, Nicole and Marcus are going to bring you through this as well. So I'm just going to really just like go through it really, really fast. So how Thirst does it is, of course, knowing our vision. Our vision is to transform a generation one story at a time, right? So just get in the right frame of mind. When you're woke, you realize that because you're a digital nation and you're in a digital generation, we just need to do digital discipleship and digital evangelism, right? It's exactly what I said, amplifying the positive voices of God, to surround each person on their screens, such that they, maybe will really take the chance to like listen. And you never know, someone could be praying the sinner's prayer, where they are. I have had friends who tell me that they came to Christ because they just went to Google some sermon. They were just longing in their souls. And these are the most like atheist friends I know, okay? It's really crazy. And then they just were so affected by what the person said that they just gave their lives to Jesus on the screen, like through the screen, as the pastor led, in the sinner's prayer. And I mean, it works, guys. It is real. The Spirit is moving through this space. We need to just get in with it, like with his move, he's already doing it. It's not like we're helping the Spirit get online. The Spirit is here, it's just we are partnering again. The church is partnering the church and it's partnering the Spirit in his work that's already happening with people, whether we're here or not. And it's our honor to do that. It's our honor to just come alongside him, right? So we are sort of bring that church into the online world where people are, right? Again, Indigenous has it this. But I think I'm going to just bring up quickly just two points of how else does it, and this is about responding to culture. So I'm gonna be talking about really quickly about these two things I've kind of like we gave language to, which is number one, responding to active culture. And what I mean by active culture, which sounds like a bacteria, right, is more like the culture that's active, that's always have like the news that's like breaking and that's breaking across the other side of the world. Maybe it's breaking in the nation. Maybe it's just this new buzz, like this thing that people are talking about now. Whether I don't, we've been watching the news over the past week, and like the buzz has been crazy, right? You see the memes, you see what people are talking about. That's what I mean by active culture. It's what is like like new, right? And it's coming up, and so thus constantly is on the watch, right? We're watching. We have a finger on the pulse of culture. We are like, okay, do you hear, like, do you see that new thing coming up? Do you see that story circling? Do you see that meme circling? Do you see what people are talking about? We need to constantly be watching. We are doing that all the time. And so the idea here is really the fact that we are, as the watchman, charged with bringing that Christian voice in, right? So don't be passive. Don't be passive about it. Don't just like go, oh yeah, cool, yeah, I saw that meme. Oh yeah, I saw them talking about it. Think about, get in the frame of mind where you're thinking about how to respond. How do I bring a God voice into this? What is the Spirit even saying into this that people are not hearing, that I can help, amplify, that I can like, give word to, that the Christians are also kind of like wondering, oh, I don't really know how to think about this, like someone needs to do it. And that can be you, to bring that Christian angle viewpoint on. Again, Gracia and Gabriel will be way more specific in this, and you can attend the workshop later, right? And so I'm also going to be talking about passive culture, right? So what passive culture is the culture that we live in on a day-to-day basis that is not like exciting or new. It's actually kind of like there. It's you're living in it. It's the atmosphere you live in, right? And these are what I mean by that is real life universal issues that sometimes are harder to discuss offline in a church setting usually, right? So these are, it could be normal things. It could be like, oh, the stuff that people like to eat, the stuff that people are interested in. It could also mean stuff that goes way deeper that people can't even talk about, but it's totally there, right? And what I mean by that are issues on sex, issues on sexuality, addictions, mental illness, apologetics questions like, oh, does God actually really exist? I don't dare to ask in like my cell group setting, but they're asking. And the thing is that we need to go where people are. And that doesn't just mean physically where they are. right? Or even digitally where they are, even spiritually where they are. We need to meet them where they are, because Jesus always met people where they were, right? Um, and so for us, it's getting into that frame of mind of where could a young person be? Because that's our audience. Where could a young person be right now in their walk with, for example, lust, or whether it's mental health, which is a huge thing, that people don't always talk about, or talk about a lot, but like don't really focus on the individual who's going through it. Like we want to like really meet them where they are, such that the person feels seen and heard, because that's the way that Jesus always left people. So here at Thirst, we try to get into that space of like, how can we meet people and be Jesus to them where they are, such that they really go like, how did you know I'm going through that? Or like they read an article, be like, oh my goodness, I thought I was the only one, right? We want to have that, we want to bring that voice in. Okay, so at a glance, what we do is these are the big topics you'll find on the Thirst navigation bar. You find stories on relationships, studies, faith, culture, mental health, do good, which is like, do good things, like humanitarian things, work, money. Okay, so these are the big ones. But the truth is that actually we live, and you might want to take a screenshot of this if you want. The stories that come out of Thirst uh, are actually really a result of us sitting at the culture front lines, right? So the culture front lines are things that go way deeper than just saying, oh, this is a culture thing. Actually, right, if you go from an inside out of a person, these are things that a young person is constantly thinking about, or like, matters to them. And as long as it matters to you, as long as you're thinking about it, it matters to us. We want to bring that voice in, right? We want to come alongside the church, because the church cannot possibly touch on every single one. They have a lot of other things to do as well, such as getting the community together and preaching, and stuff like that. And so what Thirst does is that we kind of like just come alongside, knowing that there's actually a lot more stuff people want to talk about. And it's not that the church doesn't want to talk about it. So I'm not going to go through every single one, right? But as you can tell, there's the big ones that are pointed out in bold, right? You have identity and inner person. I think that matters a whole lot more than we actually mentioned. And we want to focus as well. So as I mentioned, sexuality, gender roles, emotions, mental health. Recently on race, right? We also have status, right? That's something like class, right? Nationality, especially during National Day, right? We have things as well as like what matters to a person, body image, right? That's huge for girls, right? I think it's also a thing for guys, but it's huge, to discuss for the girls. Addiction, right? All kinds of addiction, whether it's gaming addiction, whether it's pornography, it could even be K-drama addiction. I have probably written about that before. You could have trauma as well, things that people don't normally talk about. Trauma from your childhood, right? Things that have affected you the way you are. You have money, you have career and calling are huge things, of course, because this is what we do, right? So you can sense it coming from an inner person moving out, so that it's like kind of a circle, right? So now we're moving on into the calling and the things that we actually do with our hands. We have school and studies, of course, because we're not assuming everybody's working. We have the younger audience as well who is worried about, exams. We also have student life, like, dating as a student. What does that mean, right? Or just feeling stupid because like the education system, like I'm not really doing that well and no one's speaking into this space. We want to speak into that because Jesus is there, right? Love and relationships. So again, now it's relational, right? This is probably our most popular pillar. Dating, whether it's family relationships as well, whether it's marriage, whether it's singleness, huge one, right? So singleness is a thing that that the church is increasingly talking well about, I feel. And that's why we just want to bring our voices in. If you're single, I'm single, it's about then bringing that story of that redemption that God is doing personally for you, such that the church can learn from it, like, can learn from what God is doing and telling you and teaching you as well. Right. I mentioned global, local news. So it's not just church news, it's also news, right? So we learn to respond to that. That's another culture frontline. In fact, that is one of the easiest things to watch out for, right? Breaking news, internet buzz, as I mentioned, internet fads, right? Even especially the dangerous ones. You could be watching out for challenges that the teens are doing, pop culture. What's the new Netflix show that people are watching? What's the new K-drama everyone's watching? Is there anything we can say about that? Can we learn stuff from it as well? Right? Are there any like actually godly messages that we can talk about from these things that everyone's talking about already? Gabriel will be bringing you guys a bit more into that later. Yes, as I mentioned, memes, right? It's a big thing in Singapore. I love it. I love meme culture. Right? So it's just about interacting with it as a person, as a producer as well. And lastly, of course, faith and church life, right? People have questions about their doing QT. There's another big one, right? Studying the word, walking with God. How do I evangelize? Like we're talking about digital missions right now. That's an evangelism topic. How can I do it well, right? People are probably thinking about this too, especially since we can't do mission trips for now, right? Prayer, worship, and of course cell group, right? Should I change church? What happens if I don't like my cell group member? Those are things that we also talk about. In fact, Gabriel Ong, who is here today, who will be talking later, will be, mentioning a bit about his very popular story called like you cannot change cell group like Cai Fan, which is what Singaporeans, the economy rise when you pick the dishes, basically saying that we cannot just pick and choose the cell group members that we like. It doesn't work that way. So, and then we spoke into that space because we knew that was on people's minds, right? Okay, now very very quickly, again, what I mean by at the table, because I've thrown out a bunch of topics, I've thrown out a bunch of like thoughts right here, but the truth is they probably might be still thinking, so how exactly does this do it? And so a brief glance, right? We basically, yeah, at the table we have weekly editorial pitches. So you just imagine with us a team of about 7-8 of us come together, and we basically talk about it every week. Okay, we talk about, does someone have something to say about any of these topics? Have you been noticing anything on these, like, very long list of like culture frontlines that I showed you for this week? Like, maybe you want to talk about singleness this week, right? Maybe you're just feeling it and you just like, the spirit has a message, right? And should I be the one saying it? Like, should this person be the one writing it? Or is there someone we know who should be speaking into this situation? So we also have like a whole list of contributing writers that we usually reach out to, that Gracia we're talking more about later. So you can find out about that. We also do time-sensitive responses. So we can't always just make it to Wednesday, which is our editorial meeting. If, like, for example, something happens on Friday, you're like, I'm not gonna wait and like something big happens and the whole world is talking about it, right? I'm not gonna wait until Wednesday to say something. We need to say something now. We need to discuss it now. So we sometimes just drop each other WhatsApps going like, hey, did you see this? Like, this huge thing just happened. Or like, we were like, oh my goodness, someone just passed away. Or like, oh, someone just left the faith. Or like, oh, like, someone like is just made a statement on Instagram right now, that some influencer just made a statement, and like everyone's sharing it right now, shouldn't we get in on this, right? So those are time sensitive responses. We just quickly just tell each other, right? So it's always being in that frame of mind of like, do we have something to say about this? Should we be saying something about this? And we'll be like, my teammates will understand this. It's the messages that go in, and we're like, it's really really fast, such that to the point that usually when my own friends send me something, they're like, hey, did you see this? I'm like, yeah. Usually we get the first news, everyone's always like watching out for stuff anyway. So we'll immediately tell the team if we're seeing something big happen. I have my dear mom, who wants to help me most of the time with this. She'll be like, hey, write a story on this, and she sends me something that broke like 5 days ago. Okay, like mom, we already wrote the story. Or like, oh mom, like we decided that we didn't have anything to say about this. So it's quite funny because I think the people around us after a while started to understand that like this is the pulse of culture. It is fast, right? I mentioned active culture, right? It's fast and it's sometimes a bit stressful, but the good news is that everyone's watching anyway. So if you're not really gonna miss anything out. You'll definitely hear about it within the next hour that it happens. Someone's gonna tell you about it. So it's just getting again in that frame of mind. We also do seasonal pre-planning. So if you are doing things for the church, you want to just plan ahead. One thing that's helped us a lot is that we go by seasons, right? So by this, I mean by, of course, we have seasons like January is like, the year has started. Should we say anything about resolutions? That we have CNY, Chinese New Year coming up. We can write about family reunions, right, and family. If you have Valentine's Day coming up in February, we're like, oh, we should write stories about that. So it's in our minds, we have a calendar, right? So after a while, we just know what's going to happen every single year from January all the way to December. August being National Day, May being Mother's Day, June being Father's Day, March being International Women's Day. So you can see that for myself, it's become so like, it's second nature. We know what's going on every month because that helps us pitch our stories. Otherwise, it's really like, where am I pulling this stuff out from, right? Like, it's very hard to think about it, but seasonal planning helps a lot. So just go according to a universal calendar. Start from there. It helps a lot. Okay, and Yes, for example, mental health month is a September. September is the suicide prevention month, and then October is mental health awareness month. So around that time, we will try to like amp up our stories, amp up the pitches for like, I think we should focus more on this. I think we should go speak to that professional and get a story from them. We should get to speak to someone who is just is going through this. Maybe they have a story there as well. So that's what we tend to just discuss. Okay, so what should we say this year? Like National Day, every year it happens. So we've already had our discussion last month. What should we say this year? For National Day. Now that Singapore is going through, circuit breaker, it's going through COVID-19. And of course things changed. For us this year, the stuff that we're going to be saying. So watch out for that as well. It's really exciting. And they're working on it right now. And lastly, really, it's about going as the Spirit leads. Right? And I cannot emphasize this enough. You can plan all you want. You can have all the best story ideas possible. You can have the best leads of the best people to tell their stories. But, right, the Spirit leads on this. Remember, this is his ministry. He's already in this space. We are moving along with him. We're not dragging the Spirit in. We're not like, like, Spirit, I teach you how to use the computer. That's not what we're doing. The Spirit is already here, reaching out to people, in their own spaces. And at the same time, therefore, we need to move with him, right? We need to be conscious and like keeping track with him. Like, is this what you want to release right now? Is this a story you want me to tell right now? Is this writer ready? Am I ready as a writer to even release a story as big as this? Because it matters, okay? And of course, is there a reason why we should hold back the story now? Because now is just not a good time to put out the story. Maybe the person's going through something. Maybe the person's not done living the full lesson with God yet. So we don't rush to stop the cooking. We don't, because it stops the cooking process. If God is brewing something in you and all you want to do is just throw it out online, then you're gonna it's kind of like, is it blanching vegetables? I'm a terrible cook, but like it's kind of like throwing like a cooking thing into cold water, right? So we tend to try and pace our writers, pace ourselves as we put content out, to know that the Spirit may think this is not the time to put it out yet. It's a story, but not yet. So it's a very, very Spirit-led movement at the same time. Okay, so the thing I want to leave you guys with, and I hope I haven't epically overrun, is these are the final tips I have for you. Is, as content creators in your own space, and we'll be going out there to shepherd, in a digital space, increasingly Zoom cell groups and stuff, right? These are just 3 simple tips. Number 1, learn to pasture, and to look after and to grow and nurture on the rock of Christ, on the rock of Jesus, right? Not hide them under a rock, right? You can't just make sure they never ever read this article, make sure they never ever know that this is going on in the world, right? You can't. So maybe it's better to learn how to build them up on a good foundation, right? This is what it means, to teach them how to build views and values on a biblical worldview, and that starts with obviously knowing what the Bible says. So do your Bible studies, get them in the Word, because if you don't know what the truth, capital T, is saying, then every other truth that's thrown at you, you're not really sure how to filter it as well. You will be fielding a lot of questions. But that's why we have amazing ministries like RZIM, who are helping all of us filter things and give good answers to them as well. Secondly, we have to teach our young people how to think and not what to think. It's usually easier to just say, oh, this is the answer, right? But the truth is that it's like giving a man a fish versus teaching a man how to fish. You want to, if you want to sit here and answer every single question that people have, go ahead. But the truth is that it's so much more important and more sustainable that people learn how to think, learn the frameworks of thinking, teach them how to first consciously consume their media, right? Because junk food spoils appetite for food. And then also learn that actually there's always an agenda. I've come from the agenda side of things where, we're always trying to get people to buy something. We're just trying to get people to come for this and sign up for this membership. There's always an agenda, whether or not you like it, whether or not it's intentional, there's a message going on that, as Simon mentioned, that you will receive. Right? It may not even be what they're saying. It's actually what you're receiving. And they could be saying, oh yeah, we decided to end our marriage, but that's because, we had our reasons. And remember context, they'll be like, oh yeah, we had our reasons. And then for yourself, it might be then suddenly going just blindly watching it, and you're like, oh yeah. But the next thing you know, when you yourself are considering whether or not, for example, divorce is wrong, and then you're talking in cell group, it comes out, in that in your own thought process, because it's building into you, as I mentioned. Yep. So we need to train them to consciously and wisely engage with media. Okay, and so finally, hold space. Learn to hold space for honest conversations. And again, you know, this is as I've been thinking about it, like if we cannot hold space for our members to have honest conversations, if your cell group, for example, is not a safe space to ask these questions, then it's going to be very unlikely that they know how to go out there and engage, you know, with the world who has all these questions as well, and they have questions, you have questions, and then like because I don't know how to have honest conversations, then it's kind of lost in the wind, right? You just like shut down, for example, or you just decide to just like um just go with what you know, which sometimes can just be what you just read, right? It's kind of not a fully formed thought yet, and that's actually very dangerous in an online space because all the thoughts are out there, and with the cancel culture, you know, it's scary. People might just pick it up and go like, you know, I want to shut you down, right? So we need to have like spaces in our cell groups first and foremost, where members can practice number one, active listening, right? And conversing, number two, conversing respectfully and sincerely about tough issues, right? So don't shy away from it. As I said, don't hide them under the rock. Don't shove it under the carpet. You know, get on the rock and like, you know, have these things, be brave about it, because the conversations will happen in their spaces anyway, out there with the world, with their friends. Okay, so you want to train them to be able to talk about it, and to more than talk about it, to listen to an opposing view without canceling them in your mind, even, you know, without just shutting them down, going like, oh, you know, like you don't believe in what the Bible says, then I can't talk to you. It doesn't work that way, because the thing is that we're bringing people into relationship with Jesus, and we're bringing Jesus to people, right? So but if you're always shutting them out, if you're always shutting them down, you know, then how can that happen? Because the thing is that Jesus himself, as I mentioned, went to where people like are, you know, he was always where people are. And so how then can we you know, bring the voice of God, bring the voice of God into a space where someone actually behind all that they're saying is wondering in their heart, you know, does God care? You know, does God love me? You know, am I alone in this world? And so my actual real final slide, right, is are these tips, right? It actually sounds very similar to what Simon has already said. So I'm saying that we did not plan this. So if we are saying it again, it just means the Spirit wants to say something. Okay, so that behind every piece of media, there is a message. That was what I said, right? There's always an agenda. There's always a message. But behind every message is a person, right? And we want to see that person. So yes, when we see a message, I want you to think before you believe what it says, right? Learn how to interact with it, and to not just like, oh yeah, you know, consume, just eat. Yeah. So see the message, think before you believe, but also at the same time, after seeing that message, to see the person behind it and to love that person before you judge. Learn how to sit with that person and to respectfully listen, but actively listen as well to what they're saying, right? And then realize, okay, are they really saying? Where is this person coming from? Who is this person? And I tend to have those prayers, like silent prayers in my heart when I'm speaking to people. Like, God, show me who this person is. Show me. This entire thing, you might be feeling very overwhelmed, right? You might be feeling like, oh my goodness, media is the scariest thing ever, and we should make sure that I think maybe I'll hide under the rock instead, you know. So, but I wanna just encourage everyone here to not be overcome by media. Don't be overcome by it, but instead, as it states in Romans 12, right? Overcome media with good. It doesn't say overcome media with good. It says overcome evil with good. And in that sense, and in that same space, I believe that we can overcome the evil that is in social media that's circulating, you know, with good. And that good is us showing up as the church with the voice of God and saying things to encourage, to bring Jesus to souls, and ultimately to bring souls to Jesus.